Well, we're ready to move on to our next chapter in the state-specific portion, dealing with statutes governing the activities of licensees. So really here we're talking about the laws that affect what you can do, what you have to do, can't do, stuff like that. So obviously it's a big deal, big chapter. And you see some of the topics that we're going to be addressing. Advertising, which we've already talked a little bit about that. In fact, some of this stuff will be just review, quite frankly, because some of this stuff was addressed in the national portion as well. If you see something again, I mean they're going to be asking you this, questions on this information in both the national and the state portion. So we try to hit it just so you see where questions are coming from. But we start out talking about this relationship between the broker in charge and the salesperson. So first of all, what are the duties of a broker or property manager in charge? And what we're getting ready to look at are 8 specific duties that are laid out in the law that if you are in charge, either broker in charge or property manager in charge, that you're responsible for. Now, I do get questions quite often, well then what's that got to do with us? Because this course is just to get our associate license. Why do I need to know what the duties of the broker in charge is? Well, fair question, but one, they're going to ask you about it on the state exam, so you might as well know what those duties are. But also, if you know what your broker in charge is responsible for, what their duties are, and they're not doing these things, that might give you a little information in terms of are you licensed in the right place or not, is the way I look at it. So let's see what they are. Number one, they must provide adequate supervision of all licensees and employees. And sometimes I question how much of that's going on. But look, if you're in charge, you're responsible to supervise all your licensees and employees. We're responsible to review and approve all forms, contracts, documents. And what they're talking about there is, the broker in charge gets to decide what forms or contracts are going to be used within this office. Just for example, when it comes to the contract to sale, there's probably a half a dozen or more different versions of a contract of sale that could be used just right here in South Carolina. Well, which one do you use? Well, you can only use the one that's been approved by your broker in charge. The point is this: don't be using any kind of document in a real estate transaction that your broker in charge has not approved for you to use. So, now that'll get you in trouble quite a bit. So be careful with that. Number 3, they're responsible to maintain reasonable contact with all their licensees and employees. And honestly, I kind of question how we do that, at least in a lot of the offices. You got some offices that will have 100 or more licensees in their office. And I just happen to know for a fact that a very large percentage of licensees, they never go into the office. Never even go in. And the only time they might go in is if they sell a house and going to pick up a check. But I think a lot of times now it's direct deposited. So now there's just very little reason for licensees to go into the office, or at least a high percentage of them nowadays. So, I question how do you maintain contact? What are you doing to maintain contact with licensees and supervising the licensees when you rarely, if you ever even see them? I don't have an answer for that. But what I do know is if there's an issue, if one of your licensees gets in trouble, who's going to be responsible? The broker in charge. Because it's the broker in charge. They by law have to supervise and maintain reasonable contact with all their licensees. So if it's not happening and a licensee gets in trouble, the broker in charge is going to be responsible for it. But then the fourth one here says they must be available to the public during normal business hours. Now, that one I don't think, this is a misinterpreted provision in the law a lot. Because even when I'm teaching the broker course and talking about those getting ready to get their broker license, we go over these same duties. And the question I'll ask quite often is, what does this mean? Must be available to the public during normal business hours. Does that mean if I'm the broker in charge, I cannot leave the office during business hours? Is that what that means? And typically the answer I get is no, that's not what that means. Okay, well then how are you available to the public? Well, I got a phone. I've got email, so forth. Well, I will tell you, this provision of the law should be taken literally because it means, if a member of the public has a issue, they're involved in, maybe they've got their house listed with this office or working with an agent helping them buy a house, and they've got a problem or concern, and they need some help, they want some answers. If somebody walks into your office or that office during normal business hours, guess who better be there to address whatever their question or concern is? The broker in charge. You better be there. Well, wait a minute. Well, I've got a phone. They can call me. No, that's not what the law says. The law says you better be there to address any concerns during normal business hours. All right, so now you're trying to tell me I can't go to lunch if I'm the broker in charge? I can't go on vacation? Is that what that means? No, that's not what that means. But, here's the way this law must be interpreted. First of all, I'm not going back on what I just said. If somebody walks in off the street with an issue, there better be somebody in charge to address the issue. That's what this is saying. Now, if I'm the broker in charge and I know I'm going to need to be out of the office for a few minutes or a few hours or for a couple of days, whatever the case may be, then as the broker in charge, I can designate someone to take my place. To be in charge while I'm out of the office. The law does say, and you'll see this later, but I'll just go ahead and mention it now. The law does say the broker in charge can delegate authority. I can do that. So if I'm a broker in charge, I can delegate the authority that I have to someone else. So if I'm out of the office, I can designate somebody else to make sure they stay in the office. Now that's a key there. Whoever is designated to be there in place of the broker in charge, they better stay there. Somebody's got to be in the office. Excuse me. During business hours. Somebody got to be there. I will say too, again, the law does allow the broker in charge to delegate authority. However, the broker in charge cannot delegate the responsibility. So if I delegate authority for somebody to handle something in my behalf, they better do a good job, because however they handle it, I might as well have done it myself, good or bad, because I'm going to be responsible regardless. So obviously the broker in charge would want to find somebody they feel like can handle any kind of issue that could potentially pop up. But at the end of the day, all this is saying there better be somebody in charge in the office during normal business hours. That's what it's saying. And then the fifth duty is obviously you have to establish a written office policy manual. We talked about that in a previous chapter, but every office is required by law to have a written office policy manual. And that's the responsibility of the broker in charge to determine what the policies are in each office. Really, and kind of as a review, the policy manual is really to support the license law. And in fact, the policy manual actually becomes an extension of license law. If you read through the law, you'll see many instances where the law might say you must do this. But you'll notice it may not say how you must do it. You just say you got to do this, but it doesn't necessarily say how you must do it. And there could be any number of ways to accomplish whatever this is. But this is where the policy manual has to come into play. The broker in charge must develop policies to basically allow, this is how we're going to do this in this office, right? And then whatever that policy is, that becomes the law for anyone in that office. That's what the policy manual's for. The next duty, it says they must ensure licensees have an active license. I don't even know. There's a lot of licensees, thousands, probably, at least hundreds, if not into the thousands, of licensees just in South Carolina every year wind up or allow their license to lapse because they did not renew their license on time. I don't even know how that happens. First of all, how does the licensee forget to renew their license? This is your career. This is your business. How do you let your license expire or lapse, rather? Well, for one, the broker in charge has to ensure that it does not lapse. So, anyway, I think that's pretty cut and dry there, so I'm not going to belabor it anymore. But, the next duty says the broker in charge must maintain a trust account. Obviously, if you're going to be collecting or receiving funds from the public, it has to be kept in a trust account. And we're going to talk more about trust accounts, the requirements, how those work here coming up a little bit later in this chapter. But then lastly, we must notify the commission within 10 days if there's any change of address, phone number, email, that kind of stuff. Now, here's where I want you to be careful. Because certainly in the previous chapter, we talked about a few times. Remember, if any of the licensee's information changes, their home address, their phone number, email stuff, how long do you have to notify the real estate commission of the change? Hopefully you remember it's 30 days. But that's for individual licensees. This is saying if any of that contact information changes about the company or the office must notify the commission of the change within 10 days. Don't get those backwards on the exam because they'll probably try to do something like that to confuse you. So individual licensees have 30 days. The company/office has 10 days if anything changes. All right. So there's your duties of the broker in charge. In paragraph B, it does say the licensee can only receive compensation from their broker in charge. They're going to ask you questions about this in some fashion on the exam. You cannot receive, and by the way, when it says compensation, I think in the minds of a lot of us, we're thinking money. That compensation is not just money. Compensation is considered anything of value. Could somebody give you a gift card for a hamburger joint or for a coffee shop or whatever? They might try to, but that's considered compensation. That's something of value. And what it's saying here, you cannot receive, you cannot accept anything of value, any kind of compensation, if it did not come from your broker in charge. It has to come from the broker in charge. Now, why is this such a big deal? First of all, let me make sure we're clear on what we're even talking about here. Y'all will tell you some time ago now, but I had a licensee, one of mine, actually after a closing, it had already closed. A couple of weeks after closing, the buyer that was representing, that my licensee was representing, actually sent a thank you card to the licensee, which was very nice, obviously. Letting them know how much they greatly appreciated their help, their support, their representation. And, they were just very impressed with this licensee. But also inside the thank you card was a check for $500. Again, just a gift, if you will. And the licensee was just telling me about it. I guess they wanted me to know how good a job they did, which was awesome. But then I asked them, where's the check? Well, I deposited it into my account. I mean, they made the check out to me. That's illegal. That is a no-no. That's considered compensation as a result of a real estate transaction, and you received it from someone other than the broker in charge. That's a no-no. You cannot do that. So I told him, I said, that you need to get that money out of that account and bring it to me. First of all, it's mine. It's not yours. It belongs to the company. Right? And they said, I've already spent however much. I said, I don't care what you spent. You give me $500, give it to me so I can deposit it into the company's account. And that's the way it has to operate. It has to be turned over to the company. If it is money, check, cash, whatever, then it will be deposited into the company account. Now, should I give that money back to the licensee? I will tell you, my policy is, I will give it to you, but it comes through the right channels. So you got to make sure it's turned over to the company, let the company deposit those funds into the company account, and then a check can be dispersed to the licensee. Now again, my policy is, I'm not going to keep any bonuses or stuff like that. I give it to the licensee, but I don't have to, so I just want to be clear. Any bonuses, which is really what this would be considered, it belongs to the company. Now, I may decide, say we have a 80-20 split, where you get 80% of the commission, I keep 20% of the commission. Maybe that's our agreement. Well, then of this $500 bonus you just got, I'll give you 80% of it and keep 20% of it. Some companies may decide to do that. That's not the way I do it. But some companies may decide to do it. Because at the end of the day, it belongs to the broker in charge, and it's their decision on what to do with it. I'm just telling you, you get caught, and eventually, sooner or later, you will. If you're doing something wrong, sooner or later, you're going to get caught. But anyway, if someone tries to give you anything of value, you've got to turn it over to the company. and then let them go. Now, why does that matter? Y'all, because if it comes through the company, y'all, in this example, this $500 check, y'all, now that will be added to your 1099 at the end of the year. Y'all, that's considered earned income, and you owe taxes on it. So the IRS is going to be looking for you as well if you start collecting or receiving things of value and it's not reported properly. So that's why it has to go through the company for tax purposes, quite frankly. That's one reason. But there are other reasons, and I think they're pretty self-explanatory. But y'all don't, just another real quick example. I know a lot of times builders will and they advertise this a lot, where they might say that, the first house you sell in one of our new home subdivisions, we'll give you a $1,000 prepaid credit card. Y'all, this is on top of the commission. Well, again, y'all do not accept that card for yourself. Y'all, that card belongs to the company. Y'all, it's got to go through the right channels. Now, again, hopefully it'll wind up coming back to you. But if you just take it from anybody other than your broker in charge, y'all, that's a license law violation. You could have some issues with the IRS, obviously, but at the very least, you got a license law violation if you receive anything of value from anybody other than your broker in charge. Now, it's also saying here in paragraph B that, this is where it says in the law, you may create a business entity to operate your real estate business out of. If you recall, again, earlier chapter, we talked about like LLCs, S corporations, C corporations, all the different types of business entities. The reason we went over that is because you are allowed by law to create a business entity to work or do your real estate business out of. Now, you're allowed to do that for two reasons. One, for tax purposes. There could be some tax advantages working out of a business entity versus not having a business entity. And also for potentially for liability or risk reduction. It could reduce some liability or risk when you're practicing real estate out of a business entity. Now, I will say this too. If you have a business entity, you cannot market or advertise. If I start up Frankie Griffin Real Estate LLC, I can't market or advertise that entity, because you cannot allow any member of the public to think that Frankie Griffin Real Estate is who's representing them. No, it's the company I'm licensed with. That's who's representing them, right? So, the only reason you're allowed to have the business entity is for tax purposes, for liability purposes. It is not to be marketed as a real estate company, if you will. So be careful with that. And the law also says, if you have multiple owners, say you and your spouse are both licensed and you work and practice as a team, and so you might both want to own the business entity, and that's fine. You can have multiple owners, but you better remember this. If there are multiple owners, all owners must have an active real estate license. If anyone is not licensed or decides to go inactive, no more commissions can be paid into that entity. We cannot pay commissions to someone that is not licensed or someone that does not have an active real estate license. So you want to be careful of that. Nothing wrong with multiple owners, but all owners must have a active license. I will also tell you that if you do that, all owners have to be licensed with the same broker in charge. You couldn't have one party one owner licensed with Century 21 and the other one licensed with ER8, just for example. Can't do that. All owners must stay with the same broker in charge. So things to think about if you decide to have multiple owners of the entity. Okay. So now we look at what the office requirements are. In paragraph C, it says you have to maintain an office location which must be accessible to the public, investigators, and inspectors during reasonable business hours. So, now that's what the law says. So if I decide one day I'm going to start my own real estate company, can I operate this company out of my home? Or do I have to have some commercial place of business? I get that question all the time. Well, you're looking at, that's what you see what the law says. And I don't see anything there that suggests you cannot operate out of your home. As long as your home is accessible to the public, investigators, and inspectors. In other words, is your home going to be open to the public during business hours, reasonable business hours? As long as you can answer yes, then you should be fine. Now, I'm not going to get into it right now because it's not necessary, certainly not for test purposes. But I will tell you there are other issues that may require you to not, or will not allow you to operate out of your home. But according to licensed law, there's nothing there that says you cannot operate out of your home. Again, there may be some other reasons why you can't, but not because of licensed law. All right. But then in C2, here it indicates that we may be broker in charge of more than one office, or quite frankly, more than one company at the same time. So if I'm a broker in charge, can I be in charge of multiple offices or even companies at the same time? And obviously here it's saying I can do that. Well, wait a minute, Frankie, didn't you say that if you're a broker in charge, you have to be in the office during reasonable business hours? And how can you do that if you have multiple offices that you're in charge of? Well, remember I said, could I potentially designate someone to run the office for me? Yes. Cannot designate or delegate the responsibility, but I can delegate someone the authority to manage and run the office on my behalf. But at the end of the day, can I be broker in charge of more than one office at the same time? Yes, I can. Now, 3, this is a big problem. I see industry-wide. But it says you may not conduct business under any other name or address other than the one on their license. Listen to me, because I'm telling you right now, you're going to have potential brokers in charge will tell you things that's going to get you in trouble. Now, I will say, I don't think they're telling you to do something wrong intentionally. I just think they don't know the law. And I don't know which is worse, ignorance of the law or just intentionally being in non-compliance with the law. So I'm not sure which is worse, but I can tell you neither one of them's good. But here's what, and you're going to hear this a lot, and I hope y'all will hear what I'm saying. You will hear some companies say, well, we're a large company, we got multiple offices all over town, and quite frankly, we got offices scattered all over the state. Now, why does that matter, and why is that such a big deal for you? Well, because say you're and I just use the Columbia area, here in the Midlands. If I were operating over on the Lexington side of Columbia, and I was working with someone that lived on the northeast side of Columbia, which is the complete other side, y'all, depending on traffic, it could be anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour drive trying to get from this side of town to the other side of town. So what they'll tell you is this: say you're licensed in the Lexington office, because that's where you live, that's where you operate most of the time, whatever, but you need to meet with a client that happens to live over on the other side of town, the northeast side. Well, you can tell that client, tell them where the office is on the northeast side, and you can just meet there. It makes it a lot more convenient for the client. Y'all, that's a no-no. That says right here in the law, you cannot conduct business under any name or address other than the one that's printed on your license. So y'all, if you're licensed in the Lexington office, guess what address the commission's going to put on your license? The Lexington office. You cannot be conducting real estate business out of another real estate office. That's a no-no. So if you have people trying to tell you you can, I'm telling you, it's illegal to do that. And I know, because I've heard it, a lot of these offices, brokers in charge, they're actually using that as a recruiting tool. Trying to get you to come with us because we got all these offices and you can use all of them. And that's a no-no. Well, after going over this when I'm in a live class, the questions I tend to get a lot now would be, so you're saying I couldn't meet a client at Panera Bread to go over information or talk about some stuff? No, that would be fine. You can meet at Panera Bread. But here's the difference in why. No reasonable person would believe because we're meeting at Panera Bread that Panera Bread is representing them. No reasonable person would think that or believe that. But if you're meeting in another real estate office, there's a lot of reasons to think this is the office that's representing me, because this is where we meet every time we meet somewhere. It's this office. Why wouldn't I think this office is representing me? And it's not. They're two different offices. They each have their different license numbers. As far as the state's concerned, they're two totally different companies. So, you cannot do stuff like that. So just be careful with that. And then the last thing I will say here, I know a lot of people are better known by a different name other than their legal name. I fall in that category. Everybody that knows me by Frankie. That's what I go by. But that is not my legal name. And for a while, this was an issue because what this is saying here, you cannot conduct business under any name or address other than one on your license. Well, guess what name they're going to put on your license? Your legal name. Which means you shouldn't be marketing or advertising under any other name other than one printed on your license. Well, not too long ago, they actually kind of changed the law a little bit to help us out in this area because this was becoming a big problem. Where now, obviously you got to put your legal name on your license, but now the commission or the state will allow you to have one nickname, if you will, that can be put on your license, like in parentheses. And then you can obviously now operate under that name. But you can only have one word name. So if your nickname is Mary Beth, you can only use Mary or Beth. You can only have one word, nickname word that you put on your license, and you got to let the commission know that at the time you apply for your license. All right. So a lot there. That's number 3. And then number 4 is talking about what happens in case of death or incapacitation of a broker in charge? Yeah, obviously we always hope nothing like that would ever happen, but we also know that they do happen. Y'all broker in charge might be driving on his way to work, getting a wreck and get killed, or at least incapacitated, where they cannot conduct any business for weeks or months at a time as they're trying to recover. Y'all, that's what they're talking about here. Y'all, if something happens to the broker in charge, either death or incapacitation, y'all, best case scenario, if something like that happens, y'all, hopefully there would be someone already in the office, fully qualified, meaning already has their broker's license, and would be willing to step in and take over as broker in charge. And if there is, then obviously the commission will issue a broker in charge license to that person. They'll take over and just continue business as usual. But what if there's no one in the office that is qualified, already has a broker's license, or no one that is willing to take over as broker in charge? Well, you can't just shut down the office. Y'all, there's just too much going on to just say office is shut down. So that's what they're really addressing here in paragraph 4. And what they're saying is y'all, if no one else is able or willing to step in and take over, then the real estate commission can appoint some other licensee as broker in charge for up to 6 months. Y'all, the person that the commission appoints does not even necessarily have to have a broker's license. Obviously, they will want to make sure that they've got enough experience that they can address or handle any issues that might pop up within the office. But as long as the commission feels comfortable with the experience of the licensee, then again, they can go ahead and just appoint someone in charge for up to 6 months. So basically, when they do that, means now this office now has 6 months to get somebody fully qualified, taking all the classes, passed the exam, has their broker's license, and willing to take over as broker in charge. Y'all, you got 6 months to get somebody trained up and ready to go. If nobody's able or willing to take over in 6 months, y'all, then we're going to shut the office down. So within that 6 months, you must be preparing someone to take over, or you need to be preparing to have the office shut down, one or the other. But they do like to ask questions about that a lot. And the main thing you need to remember for test purposes, y'all, in case of death or incapacitation, y'all, the real estate commission can appoint somebody in charge for up to 6 months. That's what you need to remember there. All right. Next thing we need to look at is this record retention requirement, and hopefully a lot, if not all, this is review. But y'all, the law says we must maintain all documents for a minimum of 5 years. Guarantee you that'll be a question. 5 years. You must maintain all documents for a minimum of 5 years. But it also says that you should also maintain an electronic file. Y'all, you got to back up your files. In case something happens to one file, you got to back up somewhere else. And it says these backups should be stored somewhere off site. I'm going to tell you, if the commission comes in and asks to see a document, if it's been within the last 5 years, you better be able to produce it. I'm just telling you, if you try to tell them, well, my computer crashed and we lost files, that is not going to work for you. You should have had backup copies and so forth. So I remember that. Now we talk about advertising. And this is a kind of a big deal right here. Y'all, two things that are critical in advertising. First of all, what is advertising? Anything you're doing related to real estate. That's what we're talking about here. Y'all, whether you be on social media, Facebook, whatever the case may be. Any kind of advertising concerning real estate, you better make sure you understand what these two legal requirements are. Number one, it says you cannot market or advertise property for sale or lease without a valid written agreement to do so. Like a listing agreement or a management agreement, whichever the case may be. You have to have a written agreement in place before you can do any marketing or advertising. But what you'll see, and you see this a lot, especially on social media, where let's say today is Tuesday, and I know I'm going to be meeting with the owners of this property on Friday to list the property for sale. So I know I'm going to be listing it on Friday, but I want to get a head start. So I put on Facebook, coming soon, and maybe a picture of the house and description of the property or whatever. That's a no-no. First of all, as soon as you see the words coming soon, well, what does that mean? What do you mean coming soon? Have you listed the property for sale or not? You cannot indicate something is coming soon. If you don't have a written agreement in place, you better not be marketing that property. That's a no-no. That's what it's saying here. Okay? Now, number two is saying, any kind of marketing or advertising you do, you better also include the full name of the company you represent. It must be in all marketing, all advertising. Business cards, if you do any brochures or hand out flyers, social media, you name it, anything considered marketing or advertising. The full name of the company you represent better be addressed there. It better be on or in that marketing. And you cannot use initials. It doesn't say anything about initials. It says you must have the full name of your brokerage firm that you're associated or affiliated with. Okay. That last little bullet here, basically what it's saying here is, when you're doing social media or some kind of electronic advertising, marketing or what have you, some of depending on what platform you're on, it may limit how many characters you can actually type into a post, for example. And maybe if you have to put in or type in the full name of the company you're with, that eats up so much of the characters that you're allowed to have that you can't get all the other stuff you want to put in there. Well, what it's saying here, you could put in what they call like a hyperlink that you can embed in the post. So if I click on that link, it might take me to another page. And on that other page, now I can see the name of the company that you're licensed with and so forth. As long as that hyperlink is embedded into your post, then that will work fine as well. Okay? All right. And then the third thing here under advertising, if you're under the name of a franchise, then the franchisee must be revealed in the name. Look, this has been the law for as long as I can recall. It's been a while. But apparently this is just one of these laws that they've chosen not to enforce. But I can tell you, if I tried to do it, they'd start enforcing it immediately. But look, a lot of real estate companies are considered franchises. Like ERA, Century 21, Exit, Keller Williams. These are considered franchise names that you potentially, if you wanted to, you could buy a franchise and be able to use that franchise name. Well, what this is saying here is if it is a franchise, if the company you're operating out of is a franchise real estate company, then the franchisee, the owner of the franchise, that's who the franchisee is, must be included in the name of the company. So just be aware of that. There's a couple of the franchises here in the Midlands that I'm aware of that you'll see the owner's name in there, in the name of the franchise. But most of the time, all you see is just the franchise name. You don't see the owner's name with it. So not sure why that is, but that's an issue. Now, this next section is dealing with personal transaction requirements. In paragraph F. So what's a personal transaction requirement? Well, when you get your real estate license, could you decide to buy or sell real estate and represent yourself? Can you do that? Yes, you can. Obviously, if that's what you choose to do. But let's say you're looking to buy a house and you are a licensed real estate agent and you're looking at buying a house. Do you think you would have to disclose to the other parties that you are a licensed real estate agent? Absolutely. The law says you must disclose that you are a licensee in real estate if you're representing yourself in either buying or selling real estate. Now, what I want you to pay attention to here, in the law, it is extremely specific, I believe. It's very specific on how that disclosure must be made. Here it doesn't just say you must disclose your license status. It's very specific. So let's look what it says. Now, obviously, it must state in the contract that the buyer, for example, if you're buying a house, buyer is a licensed real estate agent in the state of South Carolina. That must be there. But then notice it says that statement must be in all bold, all capital letters, underlined, and it must be on the first page of the contract of sale. That's very specific. So you can't just put it anywhere in the contract. It must be on the first page of the contract of sale. All capital letters, underlined, and in bold. That's very specific, and I suggest you remember all of those requirements. Because they're likely going to be testing you on it for sure. So, you can represent yourself, but you better make sure that disclosure is made and made the way the law says it must be made. Then in F2, here it's just saying that any trust funds must be placed in the licensee's personal trust account. Obviously, if I'm a real estate agent and I decide to sell my house, could I sell it on my own without listing it through my company or any company? Yes. Anybody can sell their own home by owner, right? Even if you're a licensee, you can do the same thing. But what it's saying is this, is if you are a licensee and you're going to require that buyer to put up earnest money, then you must have your own personal trust account to hold that money in. If you get caught collecting that buyer's money and you just stick it in your checking account or some savings account or any account other than a personal trust account, I can assure you're going to lose your license over that, and it's probably going, this is not going to go well for you here. So if you do not have a personal trust account, do not try to sell the house on your own, or at least do not be collecting funds that belong to that buyer. Don't do that, because that will get you in a lot of trouble. Again, we're going to be talking about trust accounts in a lot more detail here coming up. But for now, just know you got to have your own personal trust account if you're going to collect the funds for yourself.